All right, we're back for another Patron video Q&A, and this time our brave soul is James M. from Colorado, and he is going to ask a question that I think a lot of people have, and it's something that's actually very, very hot button in wine. James, what's your question?
Yeah, so thanks, Elizabeth. It has to do with ingredient and maybe physical property labeling for wines. So it's not so much the labels, Chateau appellation and varieté and all that, but it's things like, you know, how acidic is it? Is there residual sugar in it, and how sweet might it be, even if it's intended to be a dry wine, a red or a white. I've had some experiences where I purchased wines for we'd had with dinner, and I would say from a sugar standpoint, a sweetness, we could barely enjoy them. Do you have some thoughts on what sort of information on labels would be helpful to a consumer like me?
So this is a hot button issue, and Europe is currently in the process of making wineries do this, put information on the labels. And I personally think that this is an essential thing. I am not sure how alcohol has avoided the consumer information for this long. I think it's a little bit absurd, frankly. It's the alcohol lobby that has stopped this from happening. On their side of the ledger, I will say the following. For a small winery, it's extra paperwork and it's very, very difficult. You have to pay for an extra layer of analysis, lab analysis, making sure that everything is accurate. So I think that if they do this, and this is a little wonky, but you'll understand this, they're going to have to come up with some level of like a tolerance, just like they do with the alcohol level. An alcohol level on a bottle of wine can be plus or minus, 1 in each direction, which is crazy in the US. In other places, it's 0.5. So I think that they're going to have to allow for some of that so that we can get any information at all. So one of the things I think actually that works in wine's favor is calorie information. So I would want to see calorie information because one glass of wine is 120 calories. And that is less than like a Reese's peanut butter cup. So I think that if you drank an entire bottle of wine, it's something like most of it is about 620 calories for the entire bottle of wine, or 650 calories. That is less than many offerings of fast food places. So I think I'm not encouraging people to drink an entire bottle of wine, but this idea that it's going to materially affect your weight alone is a bit absurd. Yes, it's empty calories, but we eat a lot of empty calories. So one glass of wine while you're on a diet, it's not going to ruin your diet. So that would be one thing. You are absolutely right, though. Residual sugar levels with an explanation of what exactly that means, hugely important. And not just like a nice, I know the International Riesling Federation has the sliding scale of whether it's off dry. What does that mean? Well, they do have some parameters. Yes. So, but everybody needs to put that in, because if you think about a wine, I'm just thinking about like some commercial wines, Conundrum or Apothic. These are like wines that they have so much sugar in them. They're loaded with residual sugar. And that information is not anywhere available unless you dig into the tech sheets, in which case, then you'd have to know what you're looking for. I also think that basic ingredient labeling, if you have anything beyond grapes, yeast, I actually think it's okay. Sulfur dioxide within a certain amount, because I don't think people understand that SO2 is sulfites are, yeah, you need them for shelf stability. So maybe, for people who have sensitivity to it, they could put the tolerance levels, but most people don't have that problem. And then anything else besides that, I guess that if they filtered it with isinglass, which is a fish bladder, or they filtered it with eggs, they should probably put that. But if there are some other things in the wine that are suspect, I think we would want to know about that. There needs to be a standard list of ingredients that go into almost every wine. And those are going to be things that maybe some people don't like sulfites, like yeast, like some nutrition for the must. Oftentimes we are adding, might be adding nitrogen to the must. You might be adding potassium or phosphorus. You might be adding a mix. to make sure that it's a healthy must. You might have to clear up some problems inside of the must as the fermentation goes through. These are standard items. So I think that what I would like to see is what is, by the judgment of most experts, the things that would be a regular thing. Like if you were going to go through the process of winemaking, these are the things that would be normal. And then if you add things like colorant, mega purple, sugar, you add anything else that's not, especially things that are toxic, like Velcorin. It is a toxic substance. You have to wear a hazmat suit in order to put it into your wine, but it goes into tons of wines in Napa Valley, frankly. So we should probably know that it has to be disclosed. And then on the taste side, absolutely anything that would affect taste that they do to the wine. I don't think they need to put tannin level. I don't think they need to. I think it would be interesting to have the acidity, but you can't just put TA, like the titratable acidity. You need to explain what that means. You know, maybe another scale for acidity versus, sugar, like that kind of thing. Because again, a wine that is off dry but has a very high level of acidity is going to be something I'd be more likely to buy than something that has a low level of acidity and a lot of sugar in it, right? So I think that there's some basic things that could easily be taken care of, including the calorie count, which I think, again, is only beneficial for wine. But I think that people want to know, what are you using to filter and fine your wine? Because some people are vegan. They're not interested in that. Not everybody's going to put vegan on the bottle. I think people want to know what kinds of chemical add-ins you've done that are maybe outside of the norm. And then absolutely from a taste perspective, things of a structural nature that we can quantify. Again, tannins not really easily quantifiable, but sugar and acidity sure are, and they go on all the tech sheets. So why shouldn't that be on the bottle also, And so I think the pushback is mostly from the fact that these people are thinking it's going to be so detailed that we'll never, like, you're going to have to, the list will go on and on. But I think if people get practical about it, it needs to go on the bottle. I'm a huge proponent of ingredient labeling on wine, because I think if you don't have anything to hide, then, I mean, wine is a pretty simple product. I also get really sick of these people saying clean wine, and that would be debunked very quickly, because actually a lot of those wines that say they're clean have sugar add backs and things like that in them. And then I would love, love, love to see what's going to happen with non-alcoholic wine and the things that go into that to make it non-alcoholic, because that's another process that I think people would be maybe less likely to consider that. Not that I want everybody to only drink alcoholic wine, but I think if you think about how that has to get made, it's problematic for some people too. What do you think? What do you think should be on the label?
Well, I like where you're going. I mean, as a starter, I think for me, as we talked a little bit earlier, it was more from how I think it's going to affect the flavor and how it sort of pairs with food. So I do like the calorific value. I think that's so easy. That's an easy win. I don't know why they don't do it already. I hadn't thought of it the way you just described it. That I like. Obviously, ABV being accurate. Residual sugar I would like to see on it, and some indication of, as you said, acidity, pH, maybe also titratable acid acidity. And let's see, is there? I mean, I know others would have different views and maybe want more or less. I'm not trying to. I wouldn't want to be trying to push the industry into some ridiculous corner, but just some basic things that I'm a label reader on foods, and just the basic stuff. I don't always read what every ingredient is and what every preservative is, or if it's in there, but just a basic thing. And then, no added sugar.
Right.
It doesn't mean there's no sugar in it, but
or that the wine's been fermented dry, which is one of these fallacies that I think the mainstream press loves to put forth, that wine is packed with sugar. And I mean, when we in the industry look at this, we think to ourselves, like, but most wines are fermented dry. Wines that are packed with sugar are packed with sugar because that's a stylistic thing. And if they are packed with sugar, usually they're trying to hide it. Those are the people that are lobbying against ingredient labeling. There's two parties that really are lobbying against it. One is the large wineries, because they don't want you to know what's going into their wines. And two are the very small wineries who worry it's going to be an administrative headache. However, if you made it kind of these basic things where you didn't have to list every single thing, but only the things that were either not, things beyond the norm, right? Of all of the things that would go in, and then just some things that would affect flavor, I don't think it's going to be that bad. What I will tell you is, because the EU is making this happen, we probably will follow on, because anyone that exports wine to the EU, and they obviously import less wine than they export to the EU, but if we want to play there, we are going to have to do ingredient labeling. And once that horse has left the barn, once French wine and Italian wine and Portuguese and Spanish wine come over here, and German wine with full ingredient labeling, no one is going to put up with us not having it. So it's been delayed in the EU, but it's going to happen. Just like I hope we follow them on them getting rid of daylight saving time, which is also going to happen there first.
Yeah.
So they will lead the charge on things, and then we're going to have to follow. So I would say, I think it's coming, but I do hope it's practical. That's exactly what you're saying. And that it's a label that we can look at and say, okay, I don't care about, I mean, it's like when you read a label of anything else, I don't care about all of that, but like, what's the sodium level? I mean, wine doesn't have sodium, but like, what you're looking at on food, calorie count, fat, all of that. Wine does not have any of those things. It would be very interesting to show the clean wine people a label of just even a generic, like barefoot wine, and show them there's no fat in it. There's, it still has 120 calories unless it's one of their sweeter style, I mean? So it would be very interesting to refute a lot of the things that people are passing around about wine, because, they want you to, they have agendas. Yeah. So,
yeah, there's ways to get at it. I guess I go hunting for tech data sheets sometimes just to see if there's any of this information. Some are, some aren't. I understand that if it's not a requirement. And certainly reviews, if I can get a review from somebody who knows something in the industry, I favor that. Sometimes it's consumer reviews like Vivino, which are kind of sort of useful, sort of not. The only time I find them useful, which is not very often, but is that everyone says, well, that was sweeter than I thought it was going to be. And if you get, I don't know, 75% of the comments saying that, I say, okay, the rank amateurs like me, but together we've nailed
You're
this.
not an amateur. No, it's not. It's just, yes. I mean, that is helpful. That's why some of that crowdsourcing stuff is super, super helpful, because I mean, you don't want to be buying wines that are not made well or that are misrepresented. But again, I think it would definitely help if it was required, even on a QR code. Now it's so easy with your phone. That was another thing people were arguing against, that it was going to take up the whole back label, and they'd have to, put a QR code on. And then for those of us who are interested, you can put it up, and it would be required. And that's absolutely acceptable these days, in the days of world of technology. I'd rather have them put more on a website and do a QR code than not. Although then that excludes people that don't have phones. And so you get into all of that and yada, yada. But in any case, I think it is a good idea. I think it has been talked about way too much with nothing being done, but I do think it's going to change. And all we have to hope for is that when it does change, that it's something we can actually use, and that it's not, and that it's not too big of a burden on the small producers. The big producers can pay for it.
That's what I was going to follow up quickly, because offline you'd mentioned the small producers, and that's always a challenge, I think, with any category of consumer products. But is there a middle ground where, for small wineries and garagistas and that kind of thing, that they can I don't know, not have to be below a certain output? I don't know. I'm just throwing it on the table. I have no idea. But
yes, there could be that, but I think more than anything, they're still doing lab analysis. It's like, if your stuff is going to go out, how much sugar is in there, and how much acidity your wine has. This is just a matter of making that information available. You wouldn't ever make a wine and not know what the final sugar content is and what the acidity level is. I mean, you'd have to be a really terrible winemaker not to know that. It would be like the same thing as not knowing what oak, what types of oak your wine went into,
Right.
right? Like they'll
Right.
happily put that on their site, but they do know what the sugar
Right.
levels are because they've got readers. And in the EU, you're required by law to submit lab analysis. It's required. So that information is already done. I don't think that that is an undue burden. I think the things that are undue burdens are things that are basically, like I said, they need to come up with a standard list of things that would be normal for a winemaker to, that 90% of people would use in wine. Yeast,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know, uh, SO2, fine. You can put the SO2 level if you want, or if you don't want, that's fine too. And then all of the other, things that, sorry, my dog's in the background. All the other things that would be normal. So like, again, like I said, to help the musk go along, but I don't think that this is anything consumers would have a problem with. And I don't think that small wineries, I think they're just worried about the exhaustive list. But as long as it's not anything ridiculous, I think the bigger problem is who's trying to hide something.
Yeah.
And that's, in the end, that's the much bigger problem, is that I think people don't want us to know. Mostly it's, and I think it also is going to lead down the road of other things people don't want you to know, like were pesticides, what types of pesticides were used on your grapes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be organic, but if you used Roundup on the grapes, you might have to list that too. And I think a lot of us would not want that in our bodies.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I'm in favor of more rather than less information. I mean, like I say, I'm not in the industry, but I consume a lot of it. And the more I know, the better consumer I'll be, honestly. And I mean, the calorie thing is so simple because I hadn't thought of that. It's not a highly calorific drink or product to consume. You can have wine in moderation, and it's perfectly good.
right. And so that's the really crazy thing. All right, I will close with a very funny story. So during the pandemic, I was like, I need to lose, 5, 6, 7 pounds. I'm going to go on Noom. Noom is this app you can use. And really, I just used it to track, because they have like literally every food you could ever imagine from every brand with all of the calorie counts, because it's sort of crowdsourced. And so there's everything. So I went on it and I put in all the stuff, and I said, you know what? I'm not counting wine. I'm just not going to count it. Well, guess what? I still lost my 7 pounds. And I drank the same amount as I always drank, and exercised the same amount as I always exercise. And it did not materially affect my weight loss at all. Again,
Excellent.
there are many other things that are going to contribute to that a lot more. If you're a heavy drinker, obviously cutting down will help. But 120 calories a day, man, I mean, you could eat a peppermint patty for that. So like, we got to
Yeah.
really think about that. All right. Well, James, this was a great conversation. I love how informed you are. I also do love the fact that you love Winston Churchill, because I did read The Splendid and the Vile last year, which
All
was one of the
right.
best books
Excellent.
I've
Good on you.
ever read. Love
You
it.
like Marilyn? Do you like Marilyn Monroe as well?
I couldn't see who that was. Yes. Now I see that it is. Yes. Yes. I love the contrast. That's excellent.
And George
I
Orwell.
was going to say, you got George Orwell thrown in there. You got
Anyway,
everybody. You got the whole crowd, the whole
hey,
gang.
Elizabeth, I really enjoyed the conversation today. Thanks for your time. Much appreciated.
Well, hopefully you'll come on again next time you have a question. You always have great ones on Patreon. So thank you so much. And we will see you all next time.